Welcome back for another episode, and today's episode is a great one, and it is groundbreaking. We have our very first Olympian. Well, our very first person that has been selected to go to the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. Today, I caught up with the sport climber, Campbell Harrison, who has been selected for his first Olympic Games this year in Paris. Have a great chat with Campbell about sport climbing, which is definitely an up and coming and exciting sport, his journey as an openly out athlete, and also why potentially we aren't seeing athletes come out from those larger, more traditional sports. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. As always, and unapologetically, I am still your host, Mr. Gay Pride Australia 2022, and the third gayest person in the world last year, Dion Alexander, and you're listening to Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia. Welcome back, everybody. Today I am in the absolute presence of royalty. I have Campbell Harrison. Campbell, welcome to Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are very excited to have you. As I said, just off air or before we hit record before, you're our first athlete that's been selected to go to the Olympics, Paris Olympics 2024 later this year. Congratulations on that, first of all.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what sport you will be participating in, and yeah, how you got into the sport as well? Because I think this is a not unusual one, but not a sport that maybe a lot of people have heard about before, and it's quite also new to the Olympics.
Yeah. So I'll be competing in sport climbing. We had our first Olympic appearance in Tokyo at the last Olympics. So this will be the second time that climbing's ever been featured in the games, and it'll be my first Olympics as well, which is really exciting. There are basically sport climbing has three different disciplines. For Tokyo, we got one set of medals, so they had to combine all three into one, which was a little bit strange because you've got speed climbing, which is like a race and is quite different to lead and boulder, which are the disciplines that I do. And so they're sort of more the like technical based disciplines, kind of more traditional climbing, I guess, difficulty based. And so yeah, I'll be competing in a combined variant of those disciplines. I started climbing when I was about 8 years old. I was like, like a typical kid with too much energy. I loved climbing all over things. I loved playing games like Tomb Raider and stuff. I was a big Lara Croft fan. So I think that was what maybe inspired me to get into climbing. So I just asked my dad if it was something that we could try. And I fell in love with it pretty instantly. It was definitely like quite different to what I expected. But I guess the more I delved into climbing, the more I loved it. And so, yeah, and here we are now. It's become an Olympic sport, and I'm going to be heading there. And that whole aspect of it is a little bit crazy.
I can definitely imagine. So what was going through your head when you were announced that you were going to be going to the Olympics and representing Australia at the Olympic level?
Yeah, well, I guess it first hit me that it was going to be happening at the qualification event itself. And yeah, it was a really, really big lead up into that one. I think, I tried to qualify for Tokyo and didn't quite make it. And so the Olympic cycle is a whole 4 years. So you've got, to wait all that time again before you get the next chance. And it's a really, it's a good amount of time for the pressure to really build, for me and for my loved ones and everyone else. So, when that event came around, it was super, super intense. And probably one of the like most, emotionally and mentally taxing competitions or things I've ever done. And so, yeah, qualifying was a huge, huge relief, but also a big moment of pride and yeah, just a completely surreal feeling. Like it's really not very often that you just like sit on the floor and cry in front of like hundreds of strangers, and that's exactly what I did when I realized I'd qualified. So yeah, it's a really crazy one.
That sounds very emotional. Was part of like the reason potentially you didn't qualify for Tokyo that speed climbing aspect of it, or was it something different?
There were lots of factors. I think I didn't actually get to, it's like a whole big story, but I didn't actually get to finish the qualification event for Tokyo. It was happening right around the COVID pandemic,
Yep.
and we actually went into like a state-by-state lockdown on the day of finals for that event. So I had like a bunch of family things that had been going on prior to this, and in the end, we basically had to bail on the comp and go home at risk of getting stranded, and it was very like quick and heartbreaking decision. So that also played a lot into kind of that like sense of pressure or real desire to make up for it this time, because last time it kind of felt like unfinished business.
Yep.
Whereas this time, I was first and foremost, whether I took the spot or not, I was just glad that I had the opportunity to do it again and to give it everything and cross the finish line. And yeah, fortunately, it worked out for the best in the end.
Well, that's awesome. And it sounds like, from them adding medal categories for
Mm.
Paris, that, sport climbing is going to be a growing part of the Olympics. So that's obviously a great opportunity for you in coming years as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was definitely, I forgot the second part of your question, which was the speed climbing itself. And yeah,
Yep.
speed and I never really meshed completely. I really enjoy like when I would do speed comps, like the aspect of racing is really fun. But I think one thing about the sport that really grabs me is in lead and boulder, it's like it's always changing. Every time you step up to the wall in a competition environment, it's a new route or a new boulder that
Yep.
you've never tried or seen before. Whereas speed is a standardized route. It's exactly the same wherever you go. And so training that is in so many ways like so opposite
But
to
yep.
what inspires me about climbing itself. So I think I have a lot of respect for it. I think it's such a cool sport to watch. But it feels very different to what I love about climbing. And so it was really nice to have them separated. And I actually really enjoy this combined format as well. So even though it's like two disciplines come together, I still think it's quite a lot of fun.
But it looks absolutely fun as well. I mean, I was watching some of the telecast in Tokyo and just watching people like absolutely go hammer and tong up a wall.
Yeah.
That was captivating, and like watching obviously all your videos on Instagram of you training and practicing as well. It is quite captivating, and I can see why it's definitely made it into the Olympics. Not only from a skill aspect, but also from that viewability aspect of
Yeah,
having
for
the
sure.
audience is definitely something that I think that sport climbing's got for it. And so I think that this is probably not going to be the only opportunity you get, which I think will be very, very good for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really exciting. Like you said, I think it's a fantastic spectator sport. It's cool also that it's a sport that you can watch it on TV, at the Olympic Games, and then you can just go down to your local gym and give it a go. And
Yep.
you'll be probably climbing in one of the same gyms that I would do my training in. Like it's really connected and accessible in a lot of ways. I think so. Yeah, I hope people will see the games in Tokyo and maybe be inspired to give it a try.
Yeah, no. Also, I know there's an outdoor gym and playground close to where I live, and there's a climbing wall there as well. So I think it's definitely one of those things that some of these sports are very, very cost prohibitive to get into. So when you've got things like that that are free, obviously they're not Olympic grade level, but the accessibility to it is at that low grassroots level. I think
Yeah,
is
for
something that
sure.
it's got for it as
Definitely.
well. I just wanted to sort of segue a little bit now and talk to more about you as a person, your sexuality. From anyone that has a quick flick through your Instagram can obviously tell that you're an openly out athlete, which is absolutely fantastic. I just wanted to find out more about sort of your journey being an out athlete and potentially before you came out as an athlete as well. Have you always been open about your sexuality? Why you have been sport climbing?
Um, no, I guess because I've been involved in sport climbing for a long time. Obviously, I was 8 when I started, so I was still just sort of coming to terms with the fact that I was a little bit different. And then
Yep.
I think when I was like maybe about 11, that sort of blossomed into the realization that I was gay. And yeah, initially I think a lot of people can relate to this, that I felt like it was this, secret that I had to take to my grave.
Yep.
Um, and then coming out was a relatively slow process, but funny enough, my climbing community or my national team were one of the first groups of people that I ever told that I was gay. I think at the time I had like one or two friends that knew maybe, but this was like the first group of people. And so climbing became this little like, I don't know, it was just this place away from home where I felt comfortable exploring the idea of being open about my sexuality because at the end of the competition, I went home and it was still more or less a secret at that point. So, I had this place away from home where it could be like, yeah, I kind of got used to the idea of being out, and
Yep.
that made coming out back home a lot more comfortable. And I was able to sort of come out within school, which was a similar sort of sense of, I go to school, people know I'm gay at school, but then I come home and I have a little break from being out, and then yeah, was able to kind of come out to my family, and then it really just became something that, I never sought out to like broadcast it about myself, but I'm very, very intent about never keeping it a secret.
Yep.
And just having it be something that is a part of me. I don't feel a responsibility to like let people know or to come out of the closet again anymore. It's just who I am, and I just don't shy away from it.
Yeah, no, fabulous. And I think that definitely comes through on the way that you present, and definitely from the things that I've picked up from social media and sort of the engagements that you have. It's not like it's, hey, you're feeling the need to tell everyone. You're just living a genuine, authentic self, from from an outsider's perspective. I always love sport camaraderie and sort of teammates and that sort of thing. And the spaces that I've been delving in, with the AFL, there's a lot of camaraderie in the playing groups there, particularly about our athletes. So
Mm.
it's quite well documented that yes, there is known to be our athletes in the AFL. Just none of them are publicly out. How
Yep.
much of a safe space do you think teammates in sport create for you? And do you think that there's a reason why that seems to happen? Because it seems like teammates are really, really good about it,
Mm.
and they're really supportive, but then potentially the wider community is not as supportive as sort of those teammates are.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that. I think you go through a lot with your teammates, whether it's an individual sport like mine or a strictly team sport like AFL. I think you just inherently share a lot of vulnerability with one another. It's quite common that your teammates will see you cry, see you
Yep.
bleed, see you at your like weakest moments or your lowest moments, I guess. And so it kind of, in with a good culture, it can really, yeah, foster that sense of connectedness and make it like a safe space to be yourself. And I think, changing public perspectives as well, making, sporting teams a more comfortable place to be an out athlete. I think the crux of it really is when it becomes like public knowledge, and then
Mm.
people you don't know who don't have those shared experiences with you maybe decide to weigh in on how they see you present yourself, and that's when it really starts to become complex. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like, yeah, it just felt like my teammates were going through so many of the same things I was going through in terms of like the pressure of sport, and it just seemed to make sense that that was something that I could share with them.
Yeah. In like you've mentioned, people making comments, those
Yeah.
external people making comments, and I think sometimes they get too much weight because they really, a lot of the time, have nothing to do with our lives, don't know who we are, and have never spent any face-to-face time with us. Have you
Mhm.
experienced anyone that's from either within the wider sport climbing community, and the organization, or just the general public that's sort of had some comments or negative attitudes towards you?
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%. I feel like if I had $1 every time, maybe I would wouldn't have to do as much fundraising. But yeah, I think especially when anything I do kind of makes it outside of my bubble. I think like
Yep.
Melbourne, especially in the climbing community in Australia, is fairly open and progressive. But I think, like a few years ago, I wrote a piece about which I think a lot of public outlets would see as my like coming out, even though had been out for a long time. But I wrote an article for this magazine based in the States, and that got published. And the comments section for that was just trash. Like a lot of Yeah, people, a lot of like really, I don't know, like specific assumptions that people would make about me
Yeah.
based on like what I'd written in this article, and it just didn't stop coming. And I think that's probably like the most forward example of like of it that I've experienced. But yeah, I think if I say something that people don't agree with, my queerness or my sexuality is kind of the first thing that they'll choose to pick apart because
Yeah.
I guess it sticks out as different. So yeah, sometimes you do get those stark reminders that like, oh, not everybody is progressive or maybe as progressive as they think they are, you know, based on the things they say. The but like my in-person experiences and the people I surround myself with have always been super welcoming and positive. And there's an amazing, like really amazing queer community within the climbing space. And
Yeah.
I'm
Awesome.
always so grateful for them.
Awesome. How do you, does like those comments or those negative comments, does it affect your performance at all? And how do you deal with those sorts of situations? Like particularly, you release an article, and we sort of wear our hearts on our sleeves when we write those sort of things. There's a lot of us, there's a lot of our own journey that's in there, and you're sharing it. You're becoming quite vulnerable with
Mm.
the reader or the viewer. How do you deal with those negative comments?
Yeah, I can't say it's ever really affected my performance because I guess it's never really commentary on my performance like or on my capacity as an athlete.
Yep.
I've been able to keep them separate in that sense. But that's not to say that like I don't take it to heart necessarily. I don't know. But I feel pretty confident about who I am as far as being a gay man, and I think when I see those trashy sorts of comments, I guess I am more concerned about the other people who might be reading those comments and how
Yep.
they might feel about it, and so I feel like I see my role in the whole thing as, you know, it's important that I'm able to stand up to it, and that people know that it's not okay, and that a
Yep.
lot of the things they're saying like maybe just aren't true.
Yep.
Um, yeah. Yeah, sometimes it can be frustrating, but I try not to let it get to me to an emotional extent.
So, yeah. No, cool. And I just want to pick up on something you've mentioned there, which actually comes up quite a bit when I'm having these conversations, particularly with our athletes. You know, I think the goal is with everyone just to live their own authentic life.
Mhm.
And no one really goes into it thinking that they're going to have to be a role model for our community or a spokesperson for our community. But even then, sort of even just telling your own telling your own lived experience and writing an article in the US. You've mentioned there that you feel like you're then responsible for other people that may be more vulnerable reading those comments and having to sort of stick up to people that have negative views of
Mhm.
our LGBTQI plus community. Do you feel that there's this just inherited role model that you need to take on, being sort of that high profile athlete now?
Yeah. Yeah, I think as an athlete and an athlete with like Olympic aspirations, I think already people expect you to become a role model,
Yep.
which in a lot of ways is something I think a lot of us are happy to take on. But then there's a whole other aspect of that when you come out as a queer athlete, whether you kind of mean to come out as a queer athlete or like me, you kind of just start posting pictures of you and your partner and people put two and two together and
Together.
then all of a sudden you are this like queer role model. And it's tricky. And I can definitely see, you know, I have like friends in athletic spaces who are queer, but they're not out publicly because you know they don't feel ready to be able to take on that sort of role model responsibility or to be able to represent the queer community in sport, or maybe they have other facets of their personality that they're already advocating for, or facets of their identity, sorry, that they're already advocating for. You know, so it's definitely not for everybody. And you know, sometimes there are times when you're just like, oh, this is a lot, or you're like, oh, I want to talk about other parts of me, you know,
Yep.
the sporting parts or my hobbies and interests and whatever. But in the same vein, you know, I always wished when I was younger that I would have more queer role models, especially in sport and especially in climbing that I could look up to. And I didn't really have that, but I like to think that now I could be that for another young queer person, so they don't have to long for a role model. They can see someone, you know, uh, working hard within their sport, being successful, and also being openly queer, and you know, not shying away from that. And then maybe they feel like they don't have to shy away from it either.
Yeah, for sure. Um, do you feel like that coming out and being open and being your authentic self has helped you in your performance and helped you with sport climbing?
Yeah, I think so. I think any time that you deal with like pressure and adversity and come out the other side of it better, I think that's gonna like benefit your life in a multitude of ways. And I think it's particularly applicable to sport. You make a lot of sacrifices, and it is very vulnerable sometimes. You really put yourself out there, and try to meet these quite high expectations. And so, I think it's all transferable skills to being in a competition mindset and having
Mm.
to perform on the spot. I liken it to anything. It's like, going through school and going through exams, like those are also transferable skills onto the sporting field. And, I think it all comes together. And I think just as a as an out queer person, I have so much less baggage to carry around than I did when I was in the closet and
Was it?
keeping
Yeah.
it secret. And it just, yeah, the freer you can be in your life as a whole, like the easier it's going to be to commit yourself to sport. And that's what I found.
No, awesome. Awesome. Um, in regards to sort of uh, sport climbing and obviously its recency in the, like as an Olympic sport and inclusion in the Olympics. Do you think potentially that's helped with attitudes within the sport? When you compare it to some of these sports that have been in the Olympics forever and have been
Mm.
very high profile sports for a very long time. Do you think like having a newer sport that's come in has helped with some of these attitudes and obviously the positive attitudes that you've experienced?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think climbing being a young sport has given us a really great platform to like instill these values in our sporting community from grassroots.
Yeah.
I think um, climbing gyms in particular are really, really forward with their LGBTQIA plus inclusion, and such. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, we have this opportunity to build inclusive policies from the ground up, whereas a lot of these sports have these kind of entrenched cultures, or even sometimes, very clearly written policies
Mm.
within the sport that, it's not the safest place for queer people to participate. Um, so yeah, by virtue of that, climbing is quite a nice sport to be a queer athlete within, even if it's not, like inherently a very queer sport. But yeah, and I'd like to think that, by bringing sports like ours into front and center, yeah, we can pave the way maybe for other sports to have also more inclusive attitudes towards diversity. But we'll sort of see how things progress. I think lots of aspects of sport, including our own, have a long way to go still. So, but I'd like to think, we can be a part of that growth.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing a lot more of the smaller sports, if you like, or the sports that maybe haven't been in the Olympics as long or haven't been sort of that higher profile, really, you know, move in this space in leaps and bounds. And there's a lot of good work that's being done by sporting organizations of sports that are maybe considered smaller or don't have the same sort of
Mm.
participation rates as the larger sports. And I just think it's going to be a domino effect. It'd be nice for it to come from the bigger sports, and then I think that would definitely flood down very quickly. But I think we're just seeing that this progress from smallest to medium-sized sports that are making really good progress to then sort of lead the way for these bigger sports and probably change attitudes, particularly at like community level,
Mm.
for then to then flow onto the bigger sports. So I think it's only just a matter of time.
Yeah, for sure.
Just going back to a comment before, taking on that role model status, and you mentioned there was sort of the people that weren't really ready to take on that role model, and hence they weren't out. Do you think that stops a lot of athletes from actually coming out? That there's sort of this media spotlight and attention on them being then out rather than them being good at their sport, and then them feeling like potentially they're not equipped to have a voice and represent the whole community.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's hard to like attribute that label to yourself so forwardly. Yeah, and like I said before, sometimes you come into like an interview or a podcast like this to talk about like who you are as an athlete, and sometimes it can overshadow that. Obviously, this is very different because it's like, that's what the podcast is about. It's what we're here to talk about. But sometimes it comes out of nowhere, and you really have to, like, you're always on as like representing the queer community. And I think sometimes, like I said, I don't I don't really actively push on people that, like, I'm a gay athlete and you should watch me because I'm gay. It's like, it's just a part of who I am, and I will just post pictures of my partner and me, or share things that I'm passionate about. But because the media will grab onto the queer aspect, then
Yep.
people attribute that to you and think that you're trying to, like, maybe push some kind of agenda or something, or that you're like piggybacking on you know, uh, queer issues, like build your profile or whatever.
Yep.
But I think that gets attributed onto you, whether you like it or not, or whether it's something you're actually engaging in. So yeah, I can totally empathize with people who choose not to out themselves. I wish more people would, because it is quite empowering to see athletes in sport, especially athletes who are in their careers. You see a lot of athletes come out post sporting career,
Yes.
which is great. But yeah, it would be really nice to see, more queer athletes within the sport, and also, like, I guess, see the culture get to a point where people don't feel like they have to keep their identities kind of a little bit secret while they're also participating in sport. Those two things can coexist.
Yes, yes. And I think, we're starting to get more and more people and athletes that are coming out in the middle and near the tops of their career, which is really a positive sign. Maybe
Mhm.
not always in the big sports for the moment, but I think that, there's definitely, and yourself being one of them, there's definitely some leaders in this space of people that are just growing up and being themselves, and that means that they're an openly out athlete, and then they're coming through the ranks and they're just showing the rest of us that the two things can coexist. You can be a good athlete and you can be true to yourself, and you can do well. And in fact, most of the time what we're finding is when someone is out, they are actually performing better
Oh
because
yeah.
they don't have this whole facade around them, and they're not worried about
Mhm.
who might know what, and if
Yeah,
something gets
yeah.
leaked.
It's so crazy how we spend, you look back on your time in the closet, you spend so much of it thinking that coming out would be this horrific secret, and that if everyone knew it about you, like, it would really change things for the worse. But then for a lot of people, it's not the same for everybody, but for a lot of us, it's so freeing, and you really
Mm.
are able to live to it your fullest in a new capacity, post coming out. So yeah, whatever I can do to foster a culture that will allow people to experience that freedom, that liberation of coming out, or just being open, is really important to me.
Awesome. On that then, is there any advice that you would give to an athlete that's currently in the closet, if they're debating whether they should be open about their sexuality?
I mean, obviously it's different for everybody. It's not always safe for every single person, but I think maybe just entertaining the idea of it not being a secret. Like, um, that you could maybe just, if you were gonna post a picture of, in the same way you might post a picture of you and your friend getting brunch, if you're going to brunch with your partner, posting a picture to Instagram, that sort of thing, you don't owe it to the world to, like, inform them or announce to the world that you are a certain way. But yeah, just maybe trying to, have it not be a secret, or going into conversations with the mindset that you're kind of assuming that they already know.
Yeah.
And then it really is, it's up to them to ask the question if they want to, but like, yeah, it's not your responsibility to, like, tiptoe around their assumptions of you. Yes, I don't, yeah, it doesn't have to be some kind of, like, grand announcement or some big coming out party or whatever. It can just be you being like, okay, I don't like this being a secret. It hurts to keep it so close to me. So I'm just gonna, you know, go about my day, go about my life as if everybody already knows, and then, and they'll come to their own conclusions. I think that's quite empowering. At least it was for me.
Oh no, and I think that's really good advice. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there. It's going to be a different experience for everyone. And some people are potentially not in a safe space to do it, and then others will have found their tribe. And a lot of the time within sport, as I'm seeing, there's going to be teammates or close competitors you've got a really good bond and friendship with. They're actually creating a really good support network for
Yeah.
you, which is
Yeah.
really reassuring.
And my experience is that for every person who's gonna like message you on Instagram and tell you to shut up and like stop making such a big deal about it, there's gonna be 100, 1,000 messages, of people saying that you've that they really, that they really connect with what you put out, or that you've encouraged them or inspired them to be more open in themselves. So, yeah, there are going to be people who are going to speak out against you, or say things to you that might not feel so good, but then there's going to be so many more who really make you feel justified
Yep.
in being out and proud.
Have you been surprised by some of those comments of support? And I was fortunate enough to speak at quarter time at the Pride game a couple of years ago now, between the Sydney Swans and St Kilda, and sort of posted that video of me, being interviewed on the boundary line in front of 40,000 at the SCG. And someone was like, I never thought I could go to a football game, but this has just shown me that there is a safe space, and I will be able to go. And I never thought that would be the case. And I think that comment to me really took me aback. I wasn't sort of expecting what I was doing to have that much of a significant impact on someone. So if you had like a similar experience, or been sort of, I suppose, shocked that, maybe even it's just posting a photo with your partner, at a climbing event celebrating, and then all of a sudden someone's turned around and been like, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. And it sort of shocked you.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the beginning, it's, shocked me to a degree. Like, I think just especially, after qualifying for the Olympics, like the sheer volume of messages from everybody, of course, but like specifically from the queer community, like the amount of people who sent me messages and echoed those sentiments. Maybe they feel like sport in general is just not a safe space for queer people.
Yeah.
And then they see someone engaging in sport to that sort of degree, and they think, okay, well, maybe this sport is safe, and they step out of their comfort zone and give that one a go. I can't think of like anyone in particular, but yeah, just the sheer volume of people who will reach out and give me words of encouragement, because in the same vein as other people needing that encouragement and inspiration, sometimes I need it too. Sometimes there are of course times where I'm like, oh, do I want to post this, or is this like too gay, and then I'm just like, screw it, there's these people who message me being like, yeah, I love that this is what you said, and it made me feel better about posting it myself, or whatever it might be, or just living it themselves.
Yep. Awesome. You mentioned something before which I think surprises a lot of people. Doesn't surprise me, but I still, speaking of comments that maybe come as a shock. Fundraising, you mentioned before. Now, I think a lot of people, particularly Australians, have the belief that when you go to the Olympics, the government fits the bill for you, and you get a free ride. Now, we obviously know that's not the case.
Yeah.
Particularly for, you're an Olympic sport that's in its second Olympics. So, I mean, the funding structures are just not there from, ASC and an AIS perspective. How does that feel, number one? And number two, like, how much have you actually got to physically raise to get over to something like the Olympics?
It's interesting. You get a lot of people who think that you make as an athlete, you make absolutely nothing. And then you get away like so many people who think that because you've qualified for the Olympics, all of a sudden people are just like handing you millions of dollars. And yeah, it's absolutely not the case. Like I'm in a space now where I'm able to get a little bit of support, and it's not enough to fit the bill for everything, but it's growing, especially since that Olympic qualification. But sport is it's this gig where you have to give yourself to it full time. Like you have to be calling it your job and treating it as if it's your main job when it's giving you absolutely nothing and you're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And I've often I sometimes I'm a bit blind with my spending. I just try to be as thrifty as possible and like hope it lasts. And I've definitely come home from World Cup seasons with like $100, $200 to my name and been like, okay, I need work right now, or like this is not happening.
Asking someone at the airport for a cafe job so you
Oh,
can
I
get some
know,
money to
right?
afford
Yeah,
a
yeah.
taxi home.
Yeah. It's yeah, it can be it can be really tough sometimes, and you definitely do have to make a lot of sacrifices. And you see your friends like buying themselves fun things like a new phone or a laptop or whatever it might be, and you're just like, oh, I couldn't even dream of replacing my laptop. I think I replaced my laptop a couple of years ago, and it was like spending that much money on one thing that wasn't climbing. I think I never even dreamed of doing that before. So yeah, it can be tough. Like the Olympics themselves are funded. You're playing to the games, your accommodation during your event, and then your plane ride home. That's covered. But like I said, you don't just turn up to the Olympics and compete. You have to be training like full time. Just to the my journey to qualifying was like 8 years, or sort of a long period of time just to get to qualifying, and that's all full time. It's your main focus every single day, and then you qualify and the support goes up, but you still have to be giving yourself 100% to the sport. And there's an entire World Cup season and all this training and everything that goes into being ready for the games themselves. So no matter you bring it feels like you bring in this money, but then you just throw it all
Spend it.
back at the
Yeah.
sport again.
Yeah, I think it's obviously one of those common misconceptions, and there's a lot that obviously goes on behind the scenes, like training
Yeah.
sessions and that sort of stuff, and just those sort of hidden costs that people don't understand as well. And yeah, I just hear a lot, things that not necessarily break my heart, but things that I feel for when I'm hearing athletes, and particularly like Australian level athletes, and having a job to support you know their Australian ambitions and their Australian
Yeah.
representative ambitions. I think just sometimes I wish it was all a even playing field for all of you, because I know that there's some other sports that are quite well funded, and then some athletes that are quite well funded, and then there's obviously some that are not as funded as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, it's obviously there are worse lots in life to have than like, oh, I'm an athlete, I'm not getting paid enough. Like, first world problems to a degree. But at the same time, like, yeah, I feel like it kind of compounds on itself. Like you need money, you need funding to get results, but you need results to get funding.
Yep.
And so once people who have the results are able to then just accrue more and more funding, which accrues better and better results. And it's quite hard to like that initial break in to get
Yep.
that funding to be able to work 30 hours a week instead of 40, or go to the physio. It's even just things like that. For the longest time, you'd have like an injury or something and people be like, oh, you should go to a physio. It's like, I can't afford to go to a physio. If I go to the physio, then I probably maybe I can't afford to do this World Cup or all those things. So yeah, it can be it's not the worst. It's still an exciting life to live, but it's it can be tricky sometimes.
100%. The Midsummer Festival in Melbourne. I saw that you were quite active during the festival. What did you get up to during the Midsummer Festival, and how do you find the Midsummer Festival in Melbourne?
Yeah, it was fun. It was my first time actually really engaging in the festival, which was cool. I think I always kind of just get caught up in my training and miss it until it's already happened. But yeah, my Proud to Play, which I'm an ambassador for, invited me to come on down and like say a few words and get involved judging like a dance-off competition, which I'm absolutely not qualified for to any capacity, but that was fun. And yeah, it was really nice to just walk around and see what was going on, and listen to some artists play live and that sort of thing. And yeah, it was cool. It was cool, and just yes, kind of being more aware of everything that's going on within the Midsummer Festival has been fun.
No, great. Is that something that you would be looking to do more of, and those public appearances?
I mean, I'd also like to just, I mean, I've never really been to Pride, just to like party and have a good time.
Yep.
And I love to like dance and have fun with my friends and that sort of thing. So yeah, it would be nice to get more involved in that sort of stuff. I think going and doing it as like having like speaking events and obligations when you're there can be a little bit different. But yeah, it was fun. I definitely like to get more involved in the future for sure.
No, fabulous. Is there anything else that you want to say to listeners at all?
I mean, if you're interested in learning more about me or more about the sport, you can find me on Instagram by looking up my name. I do have a crowdfund on my Instagram bio where, if people want to support what I'm doing, the link is there, and any small amount is really, really appreciated. But yeah, even just chucking me a follow or a like or sending me a message, yeah, it's always nice to engage with people. And yeah, so yeah, feel free to head on over to Instagram, and if you want to follow along with what I'm up to.
Awesome. We'll chuck all of those links in the show notes as well. So yeah, if you do want to follow Campbell's journey, I know I'm in your broadcast channel on Instagram as well.
Awesome.
So I'm
Thank you.
following that little journey to the
Cute,
Olympics. There's a lot of croissant emojis that happen
Yes.
in that broadcast channel as well.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we'll chuck all those links in the show notes so you can follow along. And as Campbell said, if you are in a position and do want to support his journey to the Olympics, then please, that link will be in there in the show notes as well for his crowdfunding page. Campbell, it's been my absolute pleasure having you on Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia. I wish you all the best, and I know that I'm going to keep following your journey up on Instagram, but I hope that everyone else does as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's been really nice.
And thank you, and we will see you all again next time.
What an absolutely great chat that was with Campbell. I can't thank him enough for giving up his time in what is going to be a very, very busy journey onto the Paris 2024 Summer Olympic Games. As we said, if you want to follow Campbell's journey, and it is great, we'll have the links to his Instagram in the show notes, as well as if you want to contribute to his Olympic efforts, he does have his fundraising page that you can donate to. And we would encourage you, if you're in a position and you're able to, that would be great to show our Australian athletes and our out Australian athletes some support for the upcoming Olympics. One of the themes that keeps coming through in these Out Athlete series is that of people living their authentic self, are performing better and feeling better. Now, while it is a massive thing to overcome and not trying to force anyone out of the closet, that journey has to happen in your own time. That coming out journey has to happen in your own time. But one of the reassuring things that we're seeing is the level of support, particularly from someone's really tight network, and then the way that they're able to flourish being authentically true to themselves is absolutely amazing, and is definitely a consideration for anyone that is thinking of coming out as an athlete. Well, team, that wraps it up for today. That's all we've got time for. Another great episode. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Thank you for sending our podcast onto people. If this episode particularly was an episode that you think someone may get something out of, if you're in the sport climbing community or anything that Campbell said really resonated with you, or you think will resonate with someone else, we'd love it if you could share the podcast. That would be much appreciated. And as always, please leave that 5-star rating and a review for us in your podcast player. We would really appreciate that. It helps us to get out to many, many more people. We are trying to create a safe space here and discussing some issues that all of us in the LGBTQIA+ community can relate to. Well, team, that wraps up another episode. I thought I got through the second episode of this year without too many fumbles, but there you go. Stumbled right at the end there. You have been listening to Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia.